Fill her up.
You're listening to the Gas Digital Network.
Good afternoon, Michael Malice here. Let that be your welcome for the next hour. We have with us the very first You're Welcome guest, my dear friend, the very failed podcaster, Tom Woods, host of The Tom Woods Show, author, was it 12 books?
Yeah.
12 books. That's just amazing. And many ebooks, which are free because no one wants to publish that garbage. What kind of, you say you're for capitalism and you're giving away books for free, you dummy. That's not how it works.
I know. I don't understand how it works at all. I haven't published a book in 6 years, so it's even more impressive that I've got the 12. I've been a lazy bum for 6 years running.
Yeah, just sitting on your butt, flapping your gums, talking to Bob Murphy and Dave Smith, who are also very failed podcasters in their own right, and a very failed comedian and a very failed economist. So it's this just failure everywhere. And you've come to the most failed place, the Gas Digital. So you were, before we got on the air, you're like, what are we going to talk about? And I said, I don't know, because I think people enjoy hearing us and our dynamic. And I'll ask you this. I think I've asked you this before when I was guest hosting your very failed show, and I failed very badly as the guest host. How do you think Tom Woods off the air is different from Tom Woods on the show? Are you even more boring?
Wow, I'm much less boring, as it turns out. So I think there are things that would surprise people about me if they were to meet me in person and really get to know me. He has
a pair of gray socks, not just the white and the black ones. He's got one pair. I gave him Heshy socks.
I have a persona, and that persona used to really reflect who I was, which was very. I mean, look, I'm still pretty conventional in some ways, in terms of the way I live my life and stuff. But I think in terms of like music I listen to and things I enjoy doing and people I like to socialize with, people would be rather surprised. And it's partly because on my show I don't want any bad language used.
Sure.
But the main reason for that, I mean, I don't know, I think sometimes that's overdone. Like, I think comedians way overuse it because it makes joke delivery much easier.
Correct. Because they're not laughing at the humor, they're laughing at the shock value.
Right. But mainly it's that I want my audience to be as big as possible, and I want a dad or a mom driving in the car to be able to listen to the show and not feel like little Johnny, age 6, is going to learn new vocabulary on my show.
Why would a mom be driving? You don't even make any sense, dummy.
Sorry, this Saudi Arabian version of You're Welcome.
Yes. Lo. Okay, that is interesting. I would challenge you on your use of, and I think you're going to agree, on your use of the word persona, because that implies it's insincere.
Yeah, that's right. That's not really quite the word.
Of you.
Yeah.
It is very legitimate. It is very Tom Woods.
Right.
Yes.
If you were to ever listen to the Tom Woods Show, you would hear the guy you know,
yes,
right,
absolutely.
on the show.
Like, I remember when I was, Stossel's people were first going to book me, and they talked to the producers at Kennedy, and they go, can he ever not be funny? And they go, can the North Korea guy ever not be funny? So, like, when you see me talk about North Korea, I'm obviously extremely earnest. There's humor used, but not in a trolling way. But that is very much me. And it's funny to me, and I want to know about how you deal with this in social media, how people have an enormous amount of difficulty recognizing those who they are fans of as complex. Like, I have people be like, oh, you're wasting too much time on Twitter. You should be talking about more time on the important issues. And let's pretend that that's true. But even on his terms, don't you realize, dipshit, that having that time spent on Twitter builds the audience, which allows me to have more people hear me out about the plight of the North Korean people?
I know, they don't think at that level. It's just, you're not doing what I think you ought to be doing with your time, and I can't think 2 stages beyond that.
1 stage.
Yeah, 1 stage. And also, sometimes people will say, "Hey, Woods, why are you wasting your time with person A, B, or C,
They
or
mean
topic
me.
A, B,
They
or
mean
C?"
me.
Yeah, well, naturally.
Yeah.
I was trying to be gentle. But they say things like that to me, and even if it is a waste of time, am I not, just because I'm Tom Woods, am I not entitled to enjoy myself?
Because you're not a human being. Your job is to spread liberty or
Yeah.
whatever, and it's like if there's downtime, do it on your time, not
Right.
on the show,
Right.
not on social media.
Right. And look, I don't want to sound like I'm contemptuous of
But that ship has sailed.
people people who listen. I mean, I really, really feel like I have an audience that makes me happy.
Yeah,
Genuinely.
Your
I mean,
audience is great.
the things they write to me, the things they're out there doing. I have a really diverse audience of all kinds of people doing all different things that make me very happy.
From white to ivory,
Indeed.
every shade
But-
in between.
But so it's wonderful. But there is still that group, and I know that you've got them too, where they see a movie, and their first thought is, "Was that a libertarian movie? Are there libertarian themes in that movie?" And
That's not my audience
mean,
at all. I'm not kidding.
oh, thank God, because once in a while, I mean, occasionally I can see how it would be interesting to look at themes in a movie and whatever. But sometimes, in fact, all the time, I just want to go to the movies. I do not want to analyze if it's libertarian or this or that. And it's like like, for example, I was considering years ago, I was considering moving to Massachusetts because that's where I was born. And that's where a lot of my friends are. I still have some living family there. I know the place like the back of my hand. There are a lot of things I love to do there. There's culture, there's everything. The
Yeah.
sporting events, everything is really very much in my DNA, and I wanted to go back there. And yeah, I know the politics there are terrible, and I know it's run
Yeah.
by bad people. But I'm not going to run my life by, well, there's bad politicians there, so I can't go someplace that would make me happy. And yet I was lectured to on social media. How dare I even consider
By
that?
whom?
Well, apparently readers of my writing.
Wow.
Yeah.
They found the guy who read your book?
And man, is he pissed. that I,
This happened to me recently. I was at an event with Juliette Lewis, the very failed actress, and someone was like, "Why are you talking to her? She's a literal communist," which I don't think is actually true. And it's like, I had earlier tweeted that to perceive everything as a function of politics is totalitarianism.
yes, it is.
And someone else is like, "Oh, you're a hypocrite. You're hardcore for gun rights, but you live in New York." Yeah, it's called costs and benefits.
Yeah.
Like, it is an enormous cost to have my Second Amendment rights being taken away from me. And there is a danger to it to a point. There are also enormous benefits. I mean, people do not have the capacity, people who otherwise would, like in terms of budgeting or in terms of, socialized welfare, healthcare, but in terms of your life, they don't understand trade-offs. And they also don't understand that if I like something doesn't mean you're going to like it and
Yeah.
that it's okay.
Yeah, it's true. And it's funny, now again, this is something you wouldn't run into because you have a very eclectic group of guests.
Yes.
I mean, with the exception maybe of Joe Rogan, or maybe it's comparable to Joe Rogan, a really, really diverse array of guests. My guests tend to be mostly libertarians.
Yeah.
And sometimes I
And
get
Christian
people,
conservatives,
like
Dave
Dave
Smith. Yeah.
But from time to time, I get people saying, you really should reach out and speak to more non-libertarians. And I hear that.
Sure.
So then I do that, and then I get people saying, "Why'd you have this guy on? He's not a libertarian." Look, just shut up.
Yeah.
It's not called the Libertarian News Hour.
Yeah.
It's called the Tom Woods Show for a
Right.
reason.
Right.
Yeah.
But the thing is, we complain, but and it's tongue in cheek. I am shocked by, given how on the spectrum our audiences are. I say that only half jokingly, and how awesome. There's no missing social cues. There's no inappropriate. Very, 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 very little.
Yeah.
And it does not. Make you would find a lot more like inappropriate social behavior with the Rand crowd.
Oh, jeez, times a million.
Times a million. And I don't.
Do any of them have a sense of humor? I mean, it's unbelievable. It's like none.
Do you know my the best Ayn Rand joke? I've told you this, right?
Well, maybe.
What does Ayn Rand say after giving head?
I don't know.
I did this for me.
There's something wrong with you.
Yeah, but that it's true. I'm gonna have that's a whole other long story. So yeah, what is your technique for building your audience? Because you had to do it yourself, and I'm sure you made mistakes along the way.
Yeah. Well, big mistake number one was
Bob Murphy.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to number 2.
Also Bob Murphy.
And why not the trifecta?
Yes. He also gets the bronze.
Well, first of all, the most fundamental mistake was taking so long to get started.
Sure.
Because I don't know if I know in a way you and I are different culturally in that you're more apt to be interested in like a wider variety of things,
Yes.
or more willing to try new things than I am, and I'm trying to get better at that.
My favorite Tom Woods moment was
Not this.
The beautiful thing about you is you have this disconnect sometimes between your brain and your heart. And so when you point out what the heart's doing, the brain is like, wow, this is crazy.
Yeah.
So we were going to plan lunch, and you said, I want to go to a place where I recognize everything on the menu. I love the idea, like, there's a dish there. You have no idea what it is. You're not going to order it. You're not even going to see it, but I can't be in this place. They serve something I don't know. This isn't for me.
This was the way to keep you disciplined so that we would get to a place that was reasonable. That's what I wanted.
And we just had cactus tacos.
I know.
And neither of us liked them, but it was okay.
But the rest of the tacos we had were perfectly fine.
Yes.
All right,
Well,
anyway.
not just fine, they were excellent.
Yeah, they were. They were.
Yes.
And it was right near where we're recording right now. Anyway, what I was going to say was because it's hard for me to make major life changes, it took me forever to start doing the show because that would be a major life change. And if I had started, a year and a half, 2 years earlier, I mean, I would be that much farther ahead. So a lot of times people say, I want to do X or Y or Z. Like, maybe I want to start a business, or maybe I want to run a podcast or whatever. And they think, but now's not the right time. And sometimes now isn't the right
Correct.
time. But it's so easy to get trapped in that because you'll always find some reason not to do it.
Yes.
Sometimes you got to just cross your fingers and go.
There's that Jim quote. Yesterday you said tomorrow.
Yeah. So that's the thing. But in terms of growing the audience, partly, it's just sheer consistency. I mean, I've been, with the exception of a couple weeks at Christmas time and some holidays, I've been releasing an episode every single weekday for 6.5 years.
That's amazing.
And so every single weekday, something with my name goes out there. And there's a YouTube version. Now, with me, it's only spoken word. There's no video. But there are still some people I can't get to use Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or whatever, and they're going to listen on YouTube. Fine.
Sure.
But that means that in the search engines, there are results for me increasingly every day on various topics.
Right.
So it becomes easier for people to find me.
Interesting.
Organically, they can find me. Also, the more guests I have on, the more audiences I get exposed to. Now, most of the guests I have on have smaller audiences than I do, but not nothing. And so they promote the episode in their circles, and then I get more people listening to me. So sometimes for me, it's generally been a slow slog like that. Or I'll come up with some topic that I know people are interested in. Like it could be, frankly, guns people are interested in. People are interested in Bernie Sanders because of his ideas. And yeah, I have ebooks on these subjects. But the idea of the ebook is I give it away for free. It's good value. Like there's good information in it. But number one, I get your email address, and so I'm going to follow up with you. And number two, all through that book, there are links to my podcast. At the end of each chapter, if you like this kind of material, you're going to get it every single weekday over on my podcast. So you do stuff like that, and after a while, and by the way, I'm still holding pretty steady in terms of my audience, despite the fact that the libertarian podcasting world has exploded since 2013.
Is that
there
true?
Are way more libertarian podcasts now, because now Bob Murphy has a show. Dave Smith's Part of the Problem has really blown up. I know you're not an expressly libertarian show, but obviously there's some overlap. We have You're Welcome, for instance. There's Free Man Beyond the Wall, Peter Quinones. There are a lot of them now. Lions of Liberty. I was almost the only game in town. It's just a handful of people back then. And half the time I'm promoting other people's podcasts.
You forgot
on my
to
show.
mention the most popular libertarian podcast.
Which is?
Austin Peterson, the Libertarian Republic.
Well,
just ask him.
There's another one. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the biggest one.
Yeah.
I don't listen to any podcasts ever.
Wasn't there a time you used to listen to mine now and again?
No. I listened to a handful of episodes,
Okay.
but it was only because there was a topic I was particularly interested in. I never listened. I've never even sat through a whole Joe Rogan other than mine, and you have to. It's not an ego thing. If you're doing these shows and it's the biggest show, you have to watch and be like, all right, what am I doing wrong? What are people responding to? What are people not? And it is also an ego boost, obviously. I don't think I've sat through a whole episode of his other than No, I can't think of. No, I must have. I think I watched Dave. That might have happened.
Well, by the way, what you're saying there, you're right. It's not ego. You have to evaluate your own performance in public speaking or anything else. It's not vanity. I mean, I listen sometimes when I'm driving. I listen to the Tom Woods Show because while I'm doing the show, I'm thinking about what's the next question. How do I drive this conversation? I can't absorb, and I know there's great information being shared, and I think I'm not going to let my listeners be smarter than I am. I got to get the same information they're getting. But it does remind me though of the story of Bill O'Reilly, formerly of Fox News. This is an absolutely, and now that it's been told in public, I can
very
say
failed
it.
broadcaster.
Very failed broadcaster. Now that the story's been told in public, I can say it. He was at a Yankees game with Brian Kilmeade, who's a big sports guy.
Yeah, I'm pals with you.
Yeah. And
also at Fox.
it was one of these games where I guess the Yankees were getting. I can't remember if it was the Yankees or Mets. I'm sorry to say, but whichever New York team, they were getting killed. So O'Reilly says, like, I don't know, maybe seventh inning. Let's just go home. So they go home, and it turns out the Yankees rally and win the game in a really exciting finish. So the next day, everybody's asking Kilmeade, "Oh, that was great. You were at the game. That must have been amazing." He said, "Well, O'Reilly made us leave early." He said, "Oh, all right, but I mean, at least you listened to it in the car on the way home, right?" No, that's not what we listened to in the car. What? They listened to the O'Reilly factor in the car on the way back. Yeah.
Was he guest hosting or was it a repeat? Was there a guest? Oh, my God.
Isn't that awful?
Yes. Oh.
So that is vanity. I would assume that right there is vanity.
Oof. Actually, I have become everything I've most hated, and now that I'm doing cardio. And now got to keep the cum gutters nice and tight. And I learned recently that the treadmill is better cardio than the bike. So what I started doing is now I get why people like their podcasts, because you're on the treadmill, you're walking briskly at an incline, and you're watching these two people talk. It's like you're hanging out with people. It totally clicked.
Yeah. See, but with me, if I'm doing any kind of physical exertion, I need really, really heavy music because that gets me more adrenaline.
Heavy music.
My favorite metal band is almost totally unknown, but they're great. It's called Insomnium.
Okay.
Check them out. I'm telling you, people listening to me, check out Insomnium. They are absolutely excellent. I'm seeing them in Orlando next month. Now, see, that's not something my people would think I would do.
Because your show is the cure for insomnia.
Indeed.
Just put this on. You'll be passed out and your own sick. Are there any topics at this point where you're like, I do not want to talk about this anymore?
Yeah, the Federal Reserve. That's it. In fact, I recently had failed podcaster Bob. See, I'm not very failed podcaster.
Very failed.
I'm not the expert here. I forgot. I had very failed podcaster Bob Murphy on for Bob Murphy Week of the Tom Woods Show. And I laid out topics we would cover in each day. And I said, how about we take a day on the Federal Reserve? And Bob said, no, that is it. I've had it. I am tired. I am sick and tired of talking about explaining how the Fed works and this and that. Somebody else can do that, not me. Because, I mean, for years, and plus I have an ebook. It's called Our Enemy, the Fed. And do you know I actually bought the domain ourenemythefed.com?
That was available?
Yeah.
I bought johno'brennan.com.
You're good at stuff like that.
And it forwards to a Trump fundraising page. He's head of intelligence, doesn't have his own domain name. Good work, John.
Can they, if he wanted to, could he come after you and kind of demand that?
Because someone owned HillaryClinton.com, and she's like, no, I want it. They're like, okay, here you go. So it's shameless what they can do. But let him fucking try, because I'm sure people would rally some legal people and have a nice public fight for that fucker.
By the way, you're talking about Hillary Clinton. Can I just, I want to just tell that quick story about the University
Take
Club.
your time. We got an hour. This isn't the Tom Woods Show.
Because I had lunch with a mutual friend of ours at a place called the University Club the other day, and they have this strict no digital, you can't, no electronic device policy. And I actually pulled my phone out ever so briefly to take a quick picture of somebody, and man, they shut me right down instantly. They saw it and they said, "Sir, no electronic device in here." Okay, fine, fair enough. Well, apparently, Hillary Clinton was there as a senator, and she was on her phone, would not get off it after they kept asking, and she was physically escorted from the building. Hillary Clinton, yeah. So, University Club, they mean it. I love those
Where's
people.
that located?
I think it's like 1 West 54th Street. Not too far from the Fox building.
Oh, wait a minute. Isn't that where Gavin got into a fight
Was it? Is that where?
I think it was. Where, or those Proud Boys who got sentenced to jail, got in a fight with Antifa, was outside there because the Young Republicans Club meet there, I think.
Oh, that could be.
Yeah. I think that's where I was for. No, never. I don't know, but yeah, I think that's where that was. There's a lot of those weird little old timey, formerly gentlemen's clubs where my kind wouldn't have been welcomed back in the day. And there's one I thought it was called the Universe on that park on Irving Place. Maybe it's called the Arts Club. I don't remember what it was. National Arts Club, I think it's called. Who cares? That stuff does not jibe well with me.
Yeah.
It just seems so stuffy to me and old timey. But that's more your kind of conservative vibe.
Well, I used to be a member of the Harvard Club just because since I don't live in New York City, it's nice to have a kind of exclusive place I could take people to lunch for business sort of meetings and stuff. And I would always have a place to stay where the rate doesn't vary seasonally, so I know it's a consistent rate. So there were tangible benefits, and also, come on, it's show-offy, and
of course,
there's a part of me that kind of goes for that stuff.
Of course, yeah. It's like I went to Harvard, not Yale.
I mean,
I should be proud of myself.
As a very failed podcaster, I need something to latch onto. Old glories will do. If not, I can't get anything else.
I can't keep harping on my 7th book.
That's right.
So, do we want to talk about our show a little bit?
Oh, sure, yeah. It's been so long since we did any recording on it. I totally forgot what you were talking about. I thought you meant our podcast, but no. Let's talk about our show.
Yeah, like people ask a lot about this show we're doing. It's animated. It's it's a politically correct guide, which based on the books.
Yep.
I don't even know how many episodes we have in the can.
Yeah, I don't know. Is it 7? Like we have to have 10 by like a few weeks from now.
Yeah,
or by the time people are hearing this, it's probably done.
No. We're gonna be into May.
Shoot, are we?
Yeah.
This thing just never ends. Well, we're having a great time, folks. We're really enjoying it.
Interesting. There it is. There's the mask dropping. There's the persona going away. It's like a sailor.
That's like these things always happen when I'm at my busiest. Like, oh my gosh, I have this thing today.
Enough of this jibber jabber. It's the question everyone wants me to ask. What do you like best about me?
Oh, I hardly know where to begin. I guess I would say that. Oh, it's a tough one, but I'm going to go with you're not easily pigeonholed. You make me think. I sometimes will see an item in the news and I'll think, I wonder what Malice's take is on this, because I genuinely don't know. Because most people, I do know what their reaction is. I do know what they're going to say. It's not interesting to me. But when I talk to you, sometimes not only do you disagree with me, but you take your position and it's so strongly held that it just jolts me out of my complacency, and I have to hear, what does Malice have to say? To have a friend like that, I mean, much less just somebody you follow in the media, but an actual friend who keeps you on your toes like that, that's a gift.
Well, that is an enormous compliment. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Hey guys, Michael Malice here. I want to tell you about Reel.com, REEL. It's toilet paper made of sustainable bamboo, and it's 3-ply, and it's really, really soft. If you go to realpaper.com and use code Malice, you get 20% off a single purchase or $10 off your first subscription box. In either case, free shipping. Try it. It's just code Malice. What they're also doing is helping people in need throughout the world. 2.4 billion people don't have access to safe toilet. Reel is going to bring that number down. If you go to reelpaper.com and use code Malice, free shipping, 20% off a single purchase. What's really great is if you have it in your house, all your friends will be like, what's with this toilet paper? Oh, it's real. You probably haven't heard of it because you're not real, but I keep it real. Because I wipe my ass with sustainable bamboo. Not like trees, like you disgusting plebs. Look at you're covered in your own filth. 3-ply is 50% better than 2-ply, which means you're going to be 50% better than your friends. And then let's get back to the show, which is 50% better than the Real Ass Podcast. If you were going to get a tattoo, what would you get?
This is like somebody asking me, would you rather? And then I say, well, I wouldn't do either one. And
Exactly.
you say, that's not how would you rather works.
Neither.
Yeah.
Give me some good choices.
Yeah, exactly.
Neither.
These people.
I hate that guy.
I don't know. Honest to goodness, I don't know what I would do.
Okay.
Because I think almost everything I can think of is cheese ball.
Okay.
I think almost every
Well,
Everyone I've seen is cheeseball.
Where
one way or another.
there's a lot of great tattoos.
Maybe they
nowadays.
are, but they seem cheeseball to me.
No. There's a lot of this kind of intricate artistry, and they've got a lot of different colors now.
Maybe.
What about when this? Not for you, but have you ever seen it where the sleeve looks like a cityscape, like a skyline? It looks amazing if it's done right, and they have birds flying over it. It's like blue sky. It looks gorgeous.
I mean, I don't argue that in the abstract it's unattractive.
So where would you get it?
Let's see. I probably
Shoulder?
upper, so that it's concealable.
Okay, that's good.
Because I wouldn't want to lead with that.
Okay,
Depending on the
nothing
audience,
on the face.
No, nothing on the face.
You're a historian.
Yeah.
I have my own interest in history a lot. Who are some of the people that you think more people should know who they are but aren't? Who's your favorite pet historical figure? Because I've got a list.
See, mine tend to be political.
Okay, that's
because
fine.
I'm interested in those sorts of ideas.
Sure.
So I like people who responded to the bad guys, but nobody ever heard their response.
Yes. Okay.
So for instance, just the other day at the University Club, there's a big portrait of John Marshall, Chief Justice of the U.S. from 1801 to 1835, and I think he did a lot of.
He laid groundwork.
Yeah, but he did some. Basically he took the nationalist view of the Constitution and just rammed it down everybody's throats, and I think he did so not altogether honestly.
Yeah, because one of the points you've made is when they're talking about looking at the Constitution at face value and trying to figure out what these words mean, it's like, you know what they meant. You were there at the ratifying
you were
conventions.
there.
You
Yeah,
discussed
exactly.
it. This isn't
Exactly.
like, oh, I wonder who these random people who wrote these mystical letters. No, you don't call them.
Right.
Invent
Right.
the phone and call them.
Well, one of the jurists who followed in his footsteps, in Marshall's footsteps, was Joseph Story. And Story wrote these big, long commentaries on the Constitution, and these commentaries built up the nationalist view that the United States is one indivisible blob, it's one undifferentiated aggregate of individuals, and I don't think that's correct. I think it's supposed to be a collection of societies, and there's plenty of evidence for that, and that there are states that the states are not just administrative units of the center. They have real roles to play.
Yeah.
And so the response to everybody's heard of Story, or at least people who are specialists have heard of Story, but the response was written by Judge Abel Upshur, and he briefly served in the cabinet in the early 1840s, and then he died very early. But he wrote his own response. And it was an examination of the Constitution, a response, line-by-line response to Story, kills him, absolutely kills him. No one's ever heard it or read about it, heard it. I found something Upshur wrote that had been lost to history forever, had not seen it referred to anywhere. I was searching for something in the Columbia University Library. It was a box of old 19th century pamphlets. I was searching that box for something else.
How big is this box? Because this is exciting to me to visual. This is kind of fun. This is like in a movie.
It's
So how
like-
big are the box that they
It's
hold
like
things in?
8.5 by 11. Just
Oh, so
a
it's
regular,
okay. It's like a
just
shoebox.
open it up about this thick, and there's this pamphlet written by Upshur in 1833 in support of the idea of state nullification. And he anticipates all the objections, responds to all the objections. The idea that a state could nullify an unconstitutional federal law, and he anticipates every objection. It's like the strongest case I've ever heard for it. Nobody had ever seen it before. So not only did I photocopy it, I published it in my book Nullification in the documents section. It had not been seen for over 150 years.
That's amazing.
And I just stumbled on it.
Wait a minute. I collect things and I love all that kind of stuff, and my house is like a hoarder / cabin of curiosities. What was the emotional response from you if this guy is like a pet hero of yours? It's like finding a new Rand book. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like, were you really like, holy crap? Because there's a thought process. You're like, okay, this can't be what I think it is.
Well, at first it was because I thought it couldn't be what I think it is.
Right.
Surely other people know about this thing. I'm just finding the original. And then in the course of reading and looking through secondary sources, nobody refers to it. It's like it doesn't exist, even though he's one of the great thinkers in this subject. And at that particular moment in history, you would want to know what he thought. No one was writing. It was just lost.
Was this like the manuscript, or was it just small?
It was a published version, but
Okay.
it was from the 1830s. I mean, it was old. It was old. So it was astonishing to come across that. And so I considered doing a collection of his stuff and publishing that as a book. But little by little, some of his things started to get published. Now with the internet, you can get all this stuff. But yeah, that was something that I was able to do. Now, by the way, before we forget, do you in fact want to say something about our show? I mean, do you want to elaborate on that?
Well, what did you mean?
Well, I mean, we started to talk about the Politically Incorrect Guide series, and then we got sidetracked. Is there anything we want to tell people about it?
It seems like you're saying something I'm not picking up. Now, this is me being autistic. What?
Well, a few minutes ago, you said, should we talk about our
but
show?
Is there anything else, anything particular you think I'm missing?
Well, do you want to talk about topics that we covered?
I don't think we should talk about topics.
Really? Okay.
Yeah,
well, what I will say is that, as people might guess, all the funny bits are due to you. I would say 98%. Because what's beautiful about the series is because it's animated, we're not limited by reality in any way. We can have a time machine. We can be talking to James Madison. I mean, all kinds of bizarre things can be going on. I can be knocking at your door at 2:00 in the morning to tell you something. I mean, it's bizarre. It's amazing and fun what we're able to get away with and do on this show.
I am very impressed with what good of a sport you're being. Because you're like the straight man on the show, and it's also fun putting you, the Tom Woods character, in ridiculous situations.
Oh yeah, like I'm wearing a dress.
Of
course, that's not too unusual. But the other thing,
I was like, how many times can I get Tom Woods in drag on the show? So I think you're both Ayn Rand and Emma Goldman. No, I think I'm Ayn Rand because I do the accent. But you're the weather girl at another episode.
Yeah.
It's just like, and especially how they animated you with this giant head. It's really going to be fun.
Yeah. People are definitely going to enjoy it.
Yeah, I'm. Having seen it, I was like, wow, this is really good.
Well, let me say one thing about it. Without giving anything away, I'll say what makes me happy about it, and I know something that you've insisted on from the beginning, is that it's not a boomer-style show.
Yes.
Where it's all boomer, conservative talking points, predictable. It challenges people. Like it's not. It's hard to pigeonhole it, and it's not just slogans from from your uncle who voted for Romney.
Yeah, and every episode we start with a theme song, "F the Police." So that was my insistence. No, the reason, but that's how I got to the thing about the history, because one thing you said on the show, which was very interesting to me, is from learning from you, a lot of times you're saying that historians nowadays actually get it right. So I think people who are libertarians or red-pilled tend to think, okay, all the history departments are a cesspool. They're all Marxist. It's all hard leftism. And you were saying, like, you didn't say this in relation to that, but we're talking about, like, the Great Depression. You're like, no, everyone understands now, historically speaking, that FDR did not cure the Great Depression.
Yeah, I mean, like,
which is counterintuitive from like a libertarian perspective.
Sure, but when even Doris Kearns Goodwin, who writes books about what a wonderful person Lyndon Johnson was, like, nobody thought Lyndon Johnson was. Maybe you liked his policies, but really nobody thought he was a wonderful person. When even she says, all right, sure, obviously Roosevelt didn't get us out of the Depression with the New Deal, but he gave us hope. You think, all right, well, then they've just handed us the whole thing. And also, I think back to my own training. I mean, I was trained by Harvard historians, and I did not think to myself, well, I'm just getting propaganda, and there's no truth in any of this. We did have a couple of propagandists in the department. There's no question about it. But everybody knew who they were, and you could avoid them if you wanted to. But at least at these levels, you do still run into people who take their work seriously. The problem will be they obviously have a bias, and they even have a bias in terms of what they choose to cover, and they're going to leave stuff out. You got to learn that on your own. But it's not like it's all BS. Like, I learned history of American foreign policy from Ernest May. Now, if you look up Ernest May, you'll find that he was a very minor official in a bunch of American administrations. So he is the very definition of an establishment figure. But the fact is, you need to know the establishment narrative. How could you not? I mean, in order to evaluate it, you have to know what it is. So I don't regret any of that.
Enough of this jibber jabber. It's the question everyone wants me to ask. What do you like best about me?
The one thing I like best about you is something that Matt Welch said when I had him on my show from Reason. And
He's unfollowed me on Twitter, you know.
Yeah, I heard about that.
Thanks to you, I'm sure. Somehow it's your fault.
Well, it makes the answer all the more interesting.
Yes.
Because he said, because I asked him this on my show. I said, what do you like best about Michael Malice?
Yeah.
And he said his loyalty. Now, apparently, Welch isn't going to reciprocate that
Well,
on
I
Twitter.
don't, no. Let me defend Matt because he could have unfollowed me for a million reasons.
see,
I post too much. I don't know. I'm not going to.
I know. I'm
we
only
never had
joking.
a confrontation.
I'm only joking.
Although apparently I'm not welcome on the fifth column, but that's okay. It's a very failed podcast.
No, but
It's
but
no
listen,
Joe Rogan. That's
but
for
in a
sure.
way, I provoked you. I mean, you walked right into what I wanted you to do because right there, you just showed your loyalty to Matt Welch.
It's not loyalty to Matt Welch. It's I expect people to give me the benefit of the doubt. So how can I ask them to do that if I'm not going to do it to somebody else?
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true. But I remember
did it for me.
Maybe people have heard the story, but the first time you and I met, we had 2 lunches. we ate at that Chinese place, and then we ate at some other place. And that second time, I made reference to somebody you hold very high regard, and it's a very dear friend of yours, and I didn't know that. And I just made some offhand disparaging remark. And a lot of people, the first time you're meeting somebody, would just let that go, and I'll bring this up with them later. But you wouldn't let it go. Now, you didn't make me uncomfortable, but you were firm about, now, wait a minute. Let me tell you the good points about this person.
Yeah.
And I walked away thinking better of that person and better of you because I thought, this is somebody who stands up for his friends.
Yeah.
And without white knighting. It's a important line.
You and everyone else will talk shit about Nicholas Sarwark over my dead body. Hey guys, Michael Malice here. Want to tell you about probably one of my favorite sponsors, which is Sheath Underwear. If you go to sheathunderwear.com, use code Malice20, you get 20% off. SHEATH underwear.com. What makes them great? Sheath Underwear comes with a dual pouch. So it makes your you-know-whats feel like they're floating on clouds while you work out or just walk around somewhere hot. It's like an inverted kangaroo pouch that keeps your junk from sticking to your legs. It really, when I first got it, they sent it to us, and I was like, all right, what is this? And now I wear it every day. They're really comfortable, and they make you feel a little bit subversive, not going to lie. They create amazing underwear. If you don't like them, and if you don't love them, they have a 100% money-back guarantee off your first pair. I wear them. Trust me, they're so fun. If you go to sheathunderwear.com, use promo code Malice20, 20% off. Take a look. They've got a ton of different styles. It's really kind of exciting. They're kind of boxer briefs. They also have regular briefs, and they use moisture-wicking technology that keeps everything breathable and incredibly comfortable, and it makes you look like you've been doing squats, as I have. Let's get back to the show. So what is some of the things that people be surprised to learn that historians actually get it right?
Well, increasingly, more and more of them will concede now that Herbert Hoover did not just sit back and do nothing during the Great Depression. So we get that. I think there are a lot of libertarians who don't like Abraham Lincoln, who think that historians don't understand that Lincoln said, in his inaugural address, that you can keep your slaves as long as I don't want you to secede or not pay the tariff, but I'm not going to interfere with it. They all know that, and they all know that he wasn't trying to abolish slavery at the beginning. Like, they all know that. Every one of them knows that. It's not the professional historians you have a beef with. It's your second grade teacher. It's Captain Kangaroo. It's whatever. But it's not the historians. Now, but still, though, if you were to ask a historian, and I don't know why, of all possible people, you would ask a historian what caused the Great Depression. Yeah, they don't know. I mean,
they'd say stock market crash.
Yeah, but then then why did the stock market crash? Why was it up so high? They would just look in, well, what does the textbook say? And I'll just repeat that. They haven't got the slightest idea. So that reminds us of the limitations of historians. Almost none of them have a good economics background. So they're just slaves to whatever the conventional wisdom is. I mean, it's like asking George W. Bush to really give you a profound answer to some important question. He would have to look around to his advisors. And that's likewise how most historians are.
Do you miss academia?
A little bit, because what I miss is getting up in front of the group of students and talking. I didn't use notes. I would come in there, I would write some stuff on the board as an outline to keep me focused, and then I would just go. And everybody in that room thought, holy, this guy knows everything. But of course, I've been teaching the same section.
And then everybody clapped.
Yeah,
they were all thinking how smart I am, and they all started applauding.
But I used to like it because I would get people saying, my other classes are excruciating, but I look forward to coming in here because I know it's going to be interesting. And you can teach this stuff in a way that makes people want to jump off a building. But I didn't.
What do you think the typical person who reads The New Yorker gets wrong the most about their view of American history? What of the establishment narrative is the most incongruous with reality?
I think their view of the state as an engine of progress, whether it's economic progress or otherwise.
Okay.
They overestimate, like even things like civil rights, where you say, well, maybe in that case, the state needed to nudge society along a bit. Like
Sure.
even if you say that, they're still giving the state way more credit and actual individuals not enough credit. So in other words, it's almost kind of assumed, well, of course, black people were helpless and there was nothing that could be done until the state came along. But when you look at the numbers, like in terms of black employment, and particularly in management positions and professional jobs, they were skyrocketing in the several years before you even had the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So in some cases like that, or let's say OSHA, which is Occupational Safety and Health, they'll look at the state does something, then there's a good result. What they don't look at was, what was the trend 20 years before the state got in? It was already upward. So maybe the state accelerated it. You could say that. But that's not what they're saying. They make it seem like there was nothing, and then the state, and then everything became good. We need a little more subtlety than that, let's say.
Okay. If you had to recommend to people, other than your own, one history book, like what's your favorite history book? Because a good history book is something you can read and be like, this is awesome.
Oh, without a doubt, this is the easiest question of the whole conversation. And you know this author, Paul Johnson.
Oh, History of the American People?
Not that one. Modern Times, his History of the World, basically. And it's from... He originally wrote it, Modern Times, the world from the 20s to the 80s. Then he expanded it into the 90s, and it got a little neocon-y for me, so I don't want that chapter. I just want the 20s to the 80s. What's great about it is, first of all, he's not a professional historian, but let me tell you something. I went through elite training programs to be a historian, and I'm sorry, but I hate to burst the bubble of professional historians. There is not some secret teaching that we have that other people don't.
Yeah.
I mean, you learn a little things about how to evaluate sources and how to use manuscript collections, but for heaven's sake, any intelligent person can write a history of something. And Johnson, who, he's not right about everything, but he's right about a lot. What's great about his work is you learn something on every page, and every page has something unique, interesting, a quotation you hadn't heard.
That's what Tyler Cowen said about The New Right. I'm not kidding.
Really?
He said there's something interesting on every page.
Yeah. Well, that's Paul Johnson, and it's relentless. It's fascinating. You get the texture, you get the personalities, you get facts that you wouldn't have thought of before otherwise, and you also get when he deals with the Great Depression, Murray Rothbard's interpretation of the Great Depression. Rothbard, of course, the great libertarian who blames the Federal Reserve for it. That's what Johnson says in his book, which, I mean, this is a mainstream, I think it's Simon & Schuster.
Oh, yeah.
And then Johnson wound up writing the introduction to a later edition of Rothbard's book on the Depression.
I did not know that.
Yeah, that's how fond he was of it.
Wow.
So that's you'll learn a ton. And he's just extremely anti-collectivist in this book. And it's just, you really learn, like I really learned what a bastard Lenin was first by reading Paul Johnson.
Really?
Yeah.
In what way was Lenin? Obviously, I don't have a high opinion of Lenin, to say the least, but what did he make about Lenin?
Well, he would point out that, yes, obviously there were problems under the old regime. But if you were worried about the Tsar's secret police, you really better be worried about the Bolshevik secret police because they were 16 times larger.
Oh, yeah.
Or the early use of concentration camps, or somebody saying they had some commissariat on, and I forget what the official name was, but one of Lenin's officials says, we should call it the Commissariat for Social Extermination. And Lenin said, of course we should, but we can't say that. I mean, it's like the concentration of quotations from him and how many memos he wrote that ended with, having people shot. You get the idea of what all his pretty speeches wound up amounting to.
What's interesting about Lenin, I just read that biography of him, I think by Victor Sebastian, who's my favorite historian, who wrote what I think is the most beautiful history book I've written, Revolution 1989, is that all this snide Jon Stewart stuff can go back to him. Lenin would write these, before he was Lenin, head of the Soviet Union, would write these riposte. How do you pronounce that? It's one of those words I've never seen
Oh,
spoken.
I think riposte.
Riposte?
Yeah.
Isn't it interesting? You see these words written, you've never
You
heard
never
them spoken.
heard him, yeah.
And we just be referring to his opponents as cunts, like in the most vulgar language.
Yeah.
And you see that even now on Twitter, like people are like, oh, blah, 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 back in the day. Like, no. 100 years ago, this is how he was talking about his foes. And he made it a point to be very personal in his contempt. And this is something that, we see to this day in very many areas of the left, and not to mention the right.
Incidentally, if people think that foul language is a recent thing, what's also interesting to read is some Martin Luther.
Oh.
And that's all the way back in the 16th century, because he wrote a work toward the end of his life called, because some people say to me, didn't Luther have second thoughts at the end of his life that maybe he had done the wrong thing? Well, if he did, he had a funny way of showing it, because his last work, depending on how you translate it, is called Against the Papacy at Rome, an Institution of the Devil.
Huh.
And in this thing, you just can count, just open up to 2 facing pages. How many times does he use scatological language in there about farts and shit and defecation and that a papal bull, instead of it being a decretal, he would call it an excretal, over and over and over and over. And so, in fact, one of his critics, John Fisher, later St. John Fisher, said, if this man really is a prophet brought to earth for us, why does he have such a potty mouth? I mean, that's just an innocent question. So there's a scholarly article on Luther called it's called something like Scatology and Eschatology in the theology of Martin Luther. So there's plenty of that stuff.
That's not the Martin Luther book that gets recommended to me most often, but that's neither here nor there. Enough of this jibber jabber. It's the question everyone wants me to ask. What do you like best about me?
I think my favorite thing about you, what I like best about you, is the very fact that you ask people, what do you like best about me? And my favorite example of this was when Laura Loomer had chained herself to Twitter headquarters in New York City.
I forgot about this.
You went down there and did a live stream of the thing. And there she is, and it's a big media spectacle, and you're shouting out at her, what do you like best about me? And I just thought that was the best thing I'd ever heard.
She's going to win, She's going to be a congresswoman from Florida.
Are you, what?
She's running for Congress.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, in your home state.
More or less.
Adopted state.
Adopted
your
state.
Adopted state. Yeah.
Oh,
so
how about that? I didn't know that.
I just saw her not that long ago, so maybe she'll be back on the show.
Yeah.
What is your favorite part of coming to New York? Because you do it fairly regularly.
Well,
besides me.
Well, you know what? Honest to goodness, I was going to say that I enjoy the time with you. Honest to goodness, it sounds sappy, but you're a really, really good friend.
Yes.
And I mean, you basically have, and plus, you're a much better podcaster than I am. So
I'm only marginally failed.
But I love the theater scene, and I know this is where you and I part company.
Oh yeah.
You hate that stuff, but I really love it. And I enjoy. I saw To Kill a Mockingbird the other night with Ed Harris, and he was tremendous. So I love the cultural stuff. I love to, and I still like to go on little tours, like little niche tours that I didn't know existed, or go like I just found out also that at Old St. Patrick's Cathedral there's a catacomb tour.
Oh my
that
gosh.
I want to do. Yeah, I mean because I love it, and it's candlelit and everything. It's like no matter how many times I come here, I don't exhaust all the things I can do.
Don't get me started on candles. Well, especially as a historian, there's so much history in New York that it's just amazing. I've got a real good question for you.
Okay.
And I think you're going to say yes, even though you're not going to want to. Has your opinion of Hamilton changed for the better since our debate?
Yes.
Oh, okay. That was easy. What did it change from to what?
Well, I mean, it's that I genuinely I hear you, and I can respect a lot of the qualities he had as a human being, and that he does have a tremendous personal story.
But you knew that before.
But not as vividly as I knew it later.
Okay.
But at the same time, I think it's safe to say that you can at least see where I'm coming from in my arguments.
No, because I don't think it's valid to like when you're rating the great presidents, right? I don't think it's valid to be like, well, here's the example. When these boomers complain on Twitter that Time Magazine named Hitler Man of the Year, They're not saying Hitler's awesome. They're
Right, I
saying
know.
Hitler had. I know you know. I'm just telling them.
yeah.
They're saying Hitler had the biggest effect on our world at the time,
Right.
which is really he's a very important figure. That's why you know who he is. That's why most people don't know what Mussolini looks like because you know what Hitler looks like. So when you're saying that, I can see your point of view. I do not see the point of view of someone who's a historian looking at Hamilton and not thinking this is an epic figure.
But that wasn't the debate.
No, but I'm saying your point of view in general. I'm saying I do know your point of view that Hamilton is malevolent politically. That I can understand very easily.
Okay.
What I'm saying is to just define any historical figure by that, divorced from every other context. That to me
I
seems
get
crazy.
that. I get it's the same reason that, as we were saying earlier, that the idea that all of life is political and you
Yes.
can't think outside that is very unhealthy.
And but the example I always use is like if you don't understand that Teddy Roosevelt was a badass because he's really the root of a much statism in American culture, there's nothing I can tell you to the contrary.
Maybe we should tell people that if you go to YouTube and you type in Woods, Malice, Hamilton, you can watch this debate.
Sure.
And it was really lively and fun. It was a great time. And that place, it was packed to the gills.
We
with
shut it
people.
down. They complained twice.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's another reason why I like FDR a lot better than Woodrow Wilson, because you can argue who did more evil. FDR, I think, by every metric, was a genuinely better person as a human being.
Probably so.
Emotionally, personality-wise, I think he cared about people more. He was less demented. He was less vindictive. I think he actually cared about the Great Depression was in part manufactured by him, but he inherited it. Woodrow Wilson created this disaster. So
Yeah, true.
I think we and I discussed this in a previous episode, but I mean that's one easy way to measure them. So, has your opinion of Jefferson worsened since you and I have spoken? Well, you were never a big Jefferson person. Let's be clear.
Yeah. I mean, what I mainly like about Jefferson is
The nullification stuff.
is his theorizing about the Union. Because anything else, like when he's president or any of that other stuff, that's where a lot of imperfections will come in. And there's some inconsistencies and irritating parts of his political thinking. But on that stuff, he's just like the Kentucky resolutions of 1798 are just a piece of brilliance, in my opinion.
Yeah, we talked about this in an earlier episode. This is one of the reasons. It's funny how we both independently came to the same conclusion about not liking Albert J. Nock. For very different reasons. You brought up because he wrote his very famous book, Mr. Jefferson, and doesn't even mention in there.
Yeah, that's right. That Nock book, I think, is just a total waste of time. Can I ask you a question on your own podcast?
Sure.
What would you say over the past 10 years would be the one or two things that Michael Malice has changed his mind on that are the most significant?
That's a good question. It's 2020, so since 2010. I think I have gotten much more optimistic about the future of life and this country. So that's a big one.
Yeah.
Like now I am 100% hopeful. So that's a big one.
And that's influenced me, by the way.
Has it?
Yeah.
How so?
Because now when I see all these doom and gloomers, I think, haven't you people listen to Malice?
Well, what they need to do is read Arthur Herman's book, The Idea of Decline in Western History.
I know, I've been meaning to do
Yeah,
that too.
and you read this book. Arthur's been on the show. He's a very failed guest. And you're like, oh, this is the same song over and over and over. And, like it's really funny to me when a lot of these alt-right types will cite like Oswald Spengler or they'll cite Lothrop Stoddard. And they're talking about imminently, the West is going to be destroyed because you have this influx of migration from inferior races, right? And it's like, it's been 90 years. Like, we have data. Now, you can say, certainly, in your perspective, that the West has gotten much worse. Fine. We could do that. We could argue about that, yes or no. You can't argue that America's dead, and Americanism is dead, and American values are dead, and the white race is dead, or any of this stuff. It's not true. So, and there's never this kind of like, when's this disaster supposed to happen? It's to me, it's the exact same psychology as climate change.
Yeah, I always wonder what would be the number of years that after which we would say, okay, sorry, we were wrong about this.
Yeah.
I mean, at what point would that have to be said? When would they have to concede that? Like likewise with net neutrality.
Oh, yeah.
How much time has to pass with nothing happening for them to say, well, that was hysterical. We probably shouldn't have said that.
Well, what about the slaughter of the Kurds? Not the the Kurds in Syria.
Okay, what about that?
That if we don't go into Syria, I talked about this with Molly Hemingway 2 weeks ago. If we don't go into Syria immediately, they're all going to be murdered.
Right, yeah, same thing.
And it's like, you're talking about murder, like a genocide, and it didn't happen. So shouldn't you be like, oh, well, maybe I should watch what I say next time? No,
never.
Never. There's never. The other thing I changed my mind about is how the extent of the depravity and malfeasance of the corporate press.
Oh, yeah.
That I underestimated just how wretched these institutions are and have been for a very long time.
Can we talk about that term for a minute, corporate press?
Sure, I talked about Molly on her episode. Sure, we can talk about it.
Because you use that instead of mainstream media
Correct.
and all that. And I want to know...
You want to say lamestream?
Yeah,
because of your,
that is just...
Because you do have a Sarah
Boomer.
Palin tattoo. It's a tramp stamp.
Well, I want to know because I don't think there's anything wrong with something being corporate.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah.
There is something wrong with it. I think there is something wrong with it.
Well, in general, I don't think there's anything wrong with the corporate form. I think there's anything wrong with corporations.
I think there is something wrong, yes.
All right. Well, that's a whole... Okay. That would
I
have
think
to be
corporations are inherently soulless. If you look at corporate art, it looks like that for a reason. It's not a coincidence. At a certain point, you have to be like, why does all corporate art look so non-cognitive?
But is that could be more a function of its size than of the fact that it conforms to the corporate form?
I disagree.
You could establish the corporate form voluntarily, right? You don't need a charter from the state. You could have a corporation. Everybody just agrees to it.
Sure, I'm not talking about the corporation in legal sense. I'm just talking about the concept of corporation. Once a bureaucracy reaches a certain size, it becomes there's certain anti-human aspects that are probably inevitable.
But then again, it's the size. So is the problem that the corporate press that it's these giant behemoths? And if so,
it's not that they're too big. If they were big, but on the side of even just having a bias, I'd be fine with it.
Okay, but I just feel like to me, it's like the people who say the problem with the Fed is that it's privately owned. That's not the problem with the Fed. That makes it sound like privately owned things are a problem. That's not the problem with the Fed. Sure. So likewise, the problem with the media is not that it's privately owned, right? I mean, that's not our problem with it.
Correct.
So doesn't corporate press make it sound like if only we had some kind of mega NPR that could correct all these people?
No, because first of all, I think the government's the biggest corporation.
Okay.
Number one. Number two is the reason let's break down why I don't use these other terms first, as I've discussed many times. I don't say mainstream media because that grants them a legitimacy they don't deserve. I do not think that the corporate press has an ideology that is mainstream in this country, and nor has it for a very long time, if ever. Number one. Number two is one of the things I've been working very hard on in the last, no pun intended, in the last year is outreach to red-pilled leftists. And, there's certain people that you and I know, I don't even mean individuals, just certain classes of people who are binary thinkers. And they think everyone on the left is the same, which is
not true,
which is deranged.
Yep.
In the same way that you're going to say that a Jeb Bush fan is the same as a Trump fan. It makes no sense whatsoever. Not to mention the Nazis and not to mention the libertarians. If you want to put them all broadly on the right, it makes no sense. And there's... Someone could be red-pilled and still just want a welfare state or want communism, whatever. I think the commies are often more red-pilled because they understand that how politics really works. So historically speaking, and Rothbard is certainly in this vein, there is an enormous distrust of corporations in this country, and especially on the left. So this is my attempt to have it be non-right versus left.
I get it.
And to tap into that, number one. Number two is the term corporate does have this connotation of gargantuan, soulless, inhuman, doesn't care about the little guy, doesn't care about anyone, just voracious, and we're all grist for the mill, which I think is which is a too kind representation of how the corporate press works. And I'll give you an example. Historically, the idea is these big corporations would take people and spit them out for the sake of profits. They're not even having the profits. They are destroying people for the sake of destroying them. And the classic example is people like Nicholas Sandmann, the cadets who are playing the circle game, which is like punch buggy. And the headlines are saying, they appear to flash white supremacist symbols. You are comfortable branding these kids with the harshest of brush, speculatively, for the sake of maintaining your control and power and keeping everyone subordinate to you. That is even more evil than what these monopolies have been accused of doing at their worst.
Yeah. That Nicholas Sandman thing, at the time, I sat down and watched the entire 2 hours worth of footage, and it was astonishing to me how it was the opposite of what actually happened, and thank God we have the footage.
But let's forget that one. Here's another one that shows that they are evil. Cenk Uygur, I never know how to pronounce his name. He's the head of the Young Turks, and I'm not trying to disrespect him.
I know who you mean.
But there's other people listening, Tom. This is like when you were on the show at Gas Digital and Compound, and we were talking about Kevin Gutzman, and you go, I start explaining who he is, and you go, I know who Kevin Gutzman is, and I go, yeah, but other people are listening to this show. Is it okay if I explain it to them? You're like, yeah, it's okay.
But Michael, you're talking to a very failed podcaster who's used to being the only one listening to his show.
So wait, I already lost my train of thought. What I was talking about? Oh yeah, so Cenk Uygur.
Yeah.
I brought this up on Nightshade several times because it's very illustrative, and also because he's a hardcore lefty. He had David Duke on his show, and they were having a conversation, but it was very argumentative, and he was calling David Duke out, and David Duke was fighting back, as you can imagine. And and at one point, I think a lot of these people who everyone else would call anti-Semites, they don't say, I'm not anti-Semitic, I'm just perceiving the truth, whatever. Or anti-Semite's a bad word, I'm good, therefore I'm not anti-Semite. Right. And David Duke, author of Jewish Supremacy, My Awakening to the Jewish Question, of which I own an autographed copy, might donate it to my shul. He goes, I'm not an anti-Semite. And Cenk goes, no, of course not, David, right? Because if there's one person who is an anti-Semite, it would be David Duke. The New York Times wrote about that article, and they say, when David Duke said I'm an anti-Semite, Cenk said, no, of course you're not. That is not possible to watch that clip and perceive him as saying that with a straight face. And even if you're going to make the case that David Duke is not as anti-Semitic as people think, literally no one would say, of course not.
Yeah, right. Of course they wouldn't say, of course not.
And that, to me, is like, okay, you are evil.
Yeah.
And this is the Times. And they got called out on it. They had a correction. He accepted their apology. But I'm like, if this isn't for social media, you, for the rest of your life, Cenk Uygur, who agreed with David Duke about him not being an anti-Semite, who has had questionable conversation with David Duke.
Yeah. And that would follow him forever.
Yes.
Shoot, I didn't know about that one.
And he's a lefty. So a lot of these boomer conservatives think, oh, the media is a wing of the DNC. They'll destroy the left, anyone who gets in their way. And they'll raise up people on the right, or in the Republican Party at least.
I think it's a good thing that there are people. Well, I think it's closer to say that the media is aligned with the DNC for the reason that this helps to explain why they're more hostile to Bernie than you would think if they're just
right,
pro-government people or something.
Yeah,
it's their they have a specific group they want to promote.
Yes.
On the left and the right, and he ain't part of it apparently.
Yes.
So I think it's a good thing that you're going to have a lot of people on the left who are going to say, "Geez, I can't even trust MSNBC."
Yes.
I mean, that's a good thing.
Where they had a body language expert to tell how Bernie was lying during the debate with Warren, a body language expert. And she said when Warren said he said these things, Bernie showed physical signs of nervousness. Because if you're on a national debate stage and being asked point blank, if your friend who's 10 feet away from you, who's also running for president, is being dishonest, regular people wouldn't be nervous. Right? So only a sociopath in that context would be fine with it.
Right.
And then if he wasn't nervous, they'd say, look, he's a sociopath. He wasn't nervous.
Yeah.
So you can't win because they're not playing any sort of decent or fair game.
And then this whole thing about Bernie had an extremely weak response to the claim that the Russians want him to win and the Russians are helping him. Because he had bought into the Russiagate stuff, he was reduced to saying, well, I'm going to say to the Russians, don't you interfere in our elections. What kind of a lame response is that? He should say, look, no sentient being can fall for this. This is obviously an attack on me to hurt me right on the eve of a major primary election.
Yeah. Tom, we're running out of time. What has been your favorite part of the interview?
I knew this was coming, you bastard. I knew this was coming.
You are welcome.
No! Are we off? Are we really off?
He was supposed to play the theme song. This is what happens when your producer's in Australia and you've got the backup theme. Let's try this again. Tom, what has been your favorite? Tom, running out of time. What has been your favorite part of this interview?
I actually enjoyed talking about our changes over the years and how we're different, but also reminiscing about that debate, because that was one of my favorite moments. Really, it's post-academia, but that was a more or less academic debate that you and I had, and we showed how it's done. It was fun, it was entertaining, it was informative. We had a packed house. If only we could think of more things to disagree about, we could do that again.
You aren't welcome.